more food producers are becoming aware of the vegan pound and wanting to cash in on it, which means we're seeing more of these highly processed vegan foods which have a lot of ingredients. They're often packaged in plastic and they've been flown halfway around the world. Is this really the answer?
I mean, I think there's a lot of vegan junk food out there, and that needs massively to change and to improve. It's got to be healthy. It's got to have low impact, because that's the whole point of it, isn't it? There are companies quite cynically cashing in on this, but actually, some of the companies are also really aware that they will be judged on their environmental footprint. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on in food technology, and I think we're going to see some big changes, and it will be easier to make really good, high quality vegan food with a very low environmental footprint. And I think what we've got to realise is that we're seeing the experimental phase at the moment, as there's this massive increase now in plant-based diets, and as the technologies develop and as the pressure develops to have very low footprint, very healthy, very tasty food, things are going to change. I'm sure that is true. And I'm incredibly excited actually by some of the huge sort of qualitative shifts that are taking place at the moment. My usual interest is in political economy. It's, how do we make these big political shifts, these big economic shifts? Actually, with food, I'm getting really interested in the technology now, partly because I'm not seeing any sensible policy being developed by governments anywhere around the world. But I think the food technologists might come along and just blow all that stuff out of the water. And the thing which really interests me more than anything else, and I've done a sort of scoping review to try to work out who's on top, and these guys seem to be way out there in terms of both the potential and of their ecological footprint, which is like really, really low, are the people in Finland developing proteins and lipids and carbohydrates from hydrogen oxygenating bacteria. These are soil bacteria. And it's just incredibly efficient, really, really simple. And it's using existing equipment. They're just using standard brewing equipment, and it's very cheap indeed, and it's high quality. So I was the first person outside the lab to eat a pancake made of this stuff. I mean, basically they have these bacteria in a vat, and it's a sort of yellow brew, doesn't look very appetizing, but then they pipe it off onto a heated roller, and it comes out as this really quite beautiful looking golden flour, because they've got natural beta carotenoids in the bacteria. And then you just mix it with a bit of water, bang, into the pan. You've got a batter, because it's 60% protein when it comes out. We actually had to put some wheat flour in to dilute the protein content, because otherwise you'd make more of an omelette than a pancake. So without any eggs, without any milk, you had too much protein in it. It's amazing. And made a pancake. And do you know what? It tasted exactly like a pancake. This was the thing which blew me away. I was expecting some sort of taste that was different, but it tasted just like a pancake. And actually protein kind of tastes like protein. It was very similar to the protein that you'd find in a normal pancake. And I thought, blimey. So, this could potentially be the feedstock for cultured milk, cultured meat, cultured eggs. With a little bit of tweaking, you can start producing lauric acid, bye-bye palm oil. You won't need that anymore. You can start producing omega-3 fish oils, long chain fish oils, the ones you can't get from land plants. We don't need the fishing industry anymore. It's like it's really very, very exciting what you can do. And our calculations that I did with the lab suggest that you could produce all the world's protein needs from an area of desert the size of Ohio, because this is such an efficient process. And if you did that, then you've got this enormous potential to rewild the world and to draw down huge amounts of carbon from the atmosphere as ecosystems recover. So it's potentially really exciting. I think this is the clincher technology. you know, we when you talk about environmental technologies, people think about wind turbines and solar panels and electric cars and all the rest of it, which are fine, you know, but this is the big one. I think this is what's really going to change things, and we're on the cusp of something bigger than digitization. You know, this is the entire food chain is going to change. The only thing really which will need to grow anymore will be fruit and veg, because it's just not going to be necessary to grow the big commodity crops. Certainly not the meat or any of the animal products, not the soya and the other pulses, not the grains. You know, you can just, everything that we get from them, you can make far more efficiently in a vat. And some people will respond with horror to that, you know, and say, oh, what a horrendous idea, getting our food from bacteria. Because, yes, it's true, for the first time in our history, we'll have staple foods which aren't reliant on photosynthesis, you know, which is an extraordinary idea. But I would say to those people, well, you know, if that horrifies you, just take a trip down to a slaughterhouse. Take a trip to an intensive livestock farm. I worked on an intensive pig farm when I was a teenager. I know what disgusting looks like. You know, if you want to see disgusting, go and take a look at that. If you want to see horror, look at the soya farms cutting down the rainforests in the Amazon, cutting down the Cerrado in southern Brazil and Argentina, the dry Chaco just disappearing like that. You know, we don't need to do any of that stuff anymore. This is really incredible. We're really on the cusp of something huge, and people haven't grasped it. Even at this Future Foods conference I was at yesterday, no one had heard of this microbial protein production. And I was talking to someone from one of the cultured meat companies and say, here's your feedstock. And it's like, oh, that is exciting. You know, there's this real sort of sense that they're all a bit balkanized. They're all a bit in their silos doing their own thing. But you start to pull some of this stuff together and you find incredible efficiencies. It's very exciting.